Welcome to the class. It is the 23rd of October. I'm Darryl Dunnington. I'll be with you this session and we'll talk about certification topics. Two certification topics, very important session to cover. Security, it's 5% of the certification, and then reporting, it's another 5%. The good thing about this particular session is that we've already covered the information. Now, we've not addressed the particular questions that they have or the topics that they have, but we will address those. But we did cover them in the last session, so this is not new material. This is existing material that you should know. You should have already gone to Pega Academy, worked through the modules, worked through the challenges that they have for you. And yesterday I went through some of those same modules. I won't go back through the modules again. I'll spend more time answering the particular topic questions that are asked and making sure that you see that in the environment. So before we get started, as always, let's take a quick review of where we are, what we are doing, and where we are going. In our last session, we spent time, which was Wednesday, covered a lot of information. We were in class for almost 2 hours, for an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes. And we looked at managing application access. So we looked at how do we discuss authentication and authorization. RBAC is one of the security methods that is used. There are two other methods that are used, but RBAC is the primary one that's utilized. And we talked about how that is associated with operator IDs. Operator IDs are generally grouped in what we call a persona. So you have a persona that's a group of like work activities. Then you have an individual operator. That operator has to have a user ID and password. So that's where the authentication comes in, allows you into the system. But that operator also has what's called a access group. That access group specifies the roles. And so that's where the authorization sets place. So we had that conversation. Then we looked at user interfaces. You should be very familiar with user UI elements in configuring UI elements, whether it's a simple component or a field that can be of many different field types that we looked at. And we configured views. We know about templates. We created a portal. We had landing pages for the portals. We had configurations for the portals. And so we definitely covered everything. And then we talked about insights. Insights is the capability to be able to take queries and quickly convert them into visual representations of that data. You have data tables you can translate it into. You have visualization charts that you can translate that into. So we covered all of that, and you guys will work on sizing. I won't talk about sizing today because that's part of another blueprint topic, but you should have covered that and how you use that estimator tool to go through and do the sizing. So where are we? You guys are working on 3 essays. So make sure that you get those essays done, get those in on time. You'll have this whole weekend. Use this weekend to get caught up. Okay. Use this weekend to get caught up. Some of you done a great job and you are where you should be, but you have work from Wednesday. You may have 2 outstanding from Wednesday, and you have these 3 for Thursday. So there's 5 in total. Again, these are a little bit smaller, quicker, faster. They're more targeted for the learning. So it shouldn't take you as long as it did for some of the others that we had to go through. So that leads us to the very last item here for Thursday. We will review the reporting, it's 5%, and we will review the security, it's 5%. In our last session, we spent a lot of time talking about the UI topics for the certification. So make sure that you go back and listen to this podcast. I listened to it the other day in English, and it did a very good job of discussing everything that we talked about for the certification. So listen to that. That document is a good document to study from also. And if you have any doubt of how learning is implemented or how a artifact is implemented like a UI, go and take a look at the mind map. The mind map does a good job for you. It explodes everything. So that's there. And of course, if you want to go back and listen to the entirety of what we covered in our last session, you can go to the channel on YouTube. And you should have received your WebEx. Okay, so here's the current update status of your essays. I can see that for the 22nd and the 23rd, no one has started working on those. So hopefully you'll get those done over the weekend. Again, they're not as long as the others that you've been working on. They're short, they're targeted, they're covering particular topics now that we're going over. So make sure that you do that. If you have friends that are way behind, there are about 4 or 5 people that are really behind. I don't know if they're still attending class or not. I can see the class list, but if they need help, please give them some help. If you need help, please contact me and I'll be here to assist you. Use this week to get caught up because next week we have a lot of tests that you'll be taking, a lot of pre-tests to qualify you to take the actual certification and for you to continue on. So it's important that as long as you're doing the work, as long as you're active, then we'll spend time and resources to help you be successful. Our today's session, as I mentioned before, will cover the reporting, which is 5%, and we'll cover the security. We'll look at security first. There are only 3 questions that they ask you there, or 2 questions that they ask for security. Very limited, but we want to make sure that we get them all correct. That's the goal, that you understand each topic so well that you make 100% on all of the topics, even the small topics, because it adds up. Our next session, that will be Monday. So let me take just a few minutes to tell you where we're going so that you'll know that it is important for you to finish your essays so that you'll have a better understanding of the material. Notice on Monday, you'll have 2 essays to do. We look at UI and security concepts. So that will be another review for you to make sure that that information is solidified in your memory and that you have a good understanding of it. The next essay you'll do will be on data elements and objects and fields and views. So now we combine and we look at data and integration, which we've already covered those topics, and the UI and the views, we've already covered those topics. So it's a rehash, it's a relook, it's a deeper look, it's a better look. You should really be familiar with it. You'll see part of the targeted learning, we'll teach something 2-3 times to make sure that you hear it, you understand it, and that it's clear. Now, notice that I have on Monday, that's why you have to be caught up. You should be finished. You should be finished with all of your mission challenges by this weekend. All of your mission challenges, you should be finished. All of them. All of the module quizzes, you should have completed those. If you've done that, Then Monday, you'll be ready to do the mission exercise. You'll be able to enable that feature to where you can get to the mission exercise and enable that. Monday morning, I'll talk about that, but Monday afternoon, the goal is for you to start working on that. You'll listen to some more lectures, and I'll cover a blueprint topic is 25%. 25% is application development. We've covered a lot of it, continuous integration and continuous development. That's core, but some other things in Scrum, we'll talk about those. And then Wednesday, we have another lecture, in-depth lecture that helps you to understand routing and approval. And for you to look at that. And I'll do another blueprint topic on Wednesday that will cover case management, 30%. Now, those two topics are 55% of the course. 55% will cover in those two topics, plus we've already covered another 10% today, and we've covered 10% for the Pega core that was at the very beginning. But then notice on Thursday, you have a mission test. That means that you have to complete the mission exercise. In order to complete the mission exercise, you have to complete all the challenges and the quizzes, and then you will be able to get into the mission test. So that's Pega's way of being able to measure how much you've learned. So you'll do that mission test in the morning, and then that Thursday evening, we'll come back and I have two tests. You'll take another test. You'll take a pre-test for that focuses on project interview concepts. So those use cases, user stories, that's core. That's a core 10%. So we make sure we measure that. We make sure that you thoroughly understand that, because as a BA, you really have to know that. And then we give you a test, just like you'll have when you take the professional exam. We've created one along with our AI assistant to go and draw and build you a test that looks exactly like what Pega will offer you. And so it's a little bit harder. We made it a bit harder, multiple choice, multiple answers. And then we have, we'll set up and we'll schedule for the Pearson VUE exam. And that Pearson VUE exam, we have it tentatively scheduled for the 5th of November. 5th of November. So that's where we are. We only have a little more than a week for us to make this happen so that you guys are well prepared. And somewhere in here, you'll have to take another test from Pega. Pega needs to qualify you so that you make a certain score on their test, and then you qualify for a voucher. That voucher is $175. It's $175 US dollars for that voucher, and you have to pass their test. So all of my tests are preparing you for their pre-test, and then you pass their pre-test, you get a voucher, and then you can sit for the exam. Okay, so hopefully you guys understand that's the map. That's where we're going. And again, I always like to tell everyone, what are we here for? 2 certifications, 5 badges. Now you can achieve by Monday your first badge here. And at the end of the class, we'll have the AWS, the certificates, because Pega utilizes AI. You need to know about AI also. And that's it. So I'll close this window. And let's go ahead and let's get started into some of the information here. Let me make sure that my system is up and running. Hopefully you have your system up and running. And if so, then you want to go to one of your applications that you built with Blueprint. Or you can use one of the exercises that you use in Pega Academy. It doesn't matter as long as you have some portions of it built out so that we can easily go in and configure it. Well, what do we want to look at? First thing that we're looking at today is on the blueprint. Let me bring up the blueprint. Let's see, where is the blueprint? Certification blueprint. There we go. On the blueprint, we're taking a look at security, 5%. Describe the relationship between personas. You should know what that is by now. It's a grouping of like activities for individuals. Operators, it's an operator with a user ID password that has to be authenticated and have authorization with an access group and roles. And of course, the access group. Access group holds all the privileges with the roles that will allow them to carry out whatever activities that they are privileged to do. And then we need to articulate the difference between authorization and authentication. That should be easy now. That should be an easy concept that you know. Authorization is simply user ID password. Some way that you can get in, some way you can log in to get into the system. That's authorization. We call it an operator in Pega. Authentication in Pega, we say that's the access group. What privileges do you have? Well, it's based upon the role, the sum of all the roles that you have. Again, this is not new material. You should know this by now. We've covered it yesterday in detail, but we didn't cover it specifically for these particular topics. So we're going to talk to these topics. And then we have 3 questions that are associated with reporting. Yesterday, we talked more about insights, but insights is one of the features within reporting. So we want to describe the benefits of using insights. Well, that's very easy. The benefits of using insights is that it quickly allows you to take data queries and convert them into either data tables or visualizations that's easier to read and understand the information. Most cases we do it for marketing. Marketing people love it because now they can show a visual representation, speaks to what they're trying to talk about. So how do you create the visualizations? How do you create the tables? We did that the other day. If you don't remember, go back to that. We'll do it again today just to make sure that we address this particular issue. And then you have a way where you can use the columns and you can use the filters and you can do the sorting. All right, so let's go ahead and hop into that. That's exactly what you see here. Those are the 5 topics that we will cover, 2 for security, and we'll have 3 for reporting. All right, let's take a look at first question. First question, describe the relationship between between persona, operators, and access groups. Well, by definition, when we look at this, by definition, we're going to look at a persona. A persona is a group of users for your application that responds or corresponds to their need as they interact with an application. Again, an example of a persona may be a group of managers, a group of developers, a group of business architects, a group of accountants. Those would be typical representations of what we would call a persona. Well, an operator would be a specific user that performs work in an application. So let's just take a look at that. Let's take a look at those 2. Go back to our environment. Oh, what happened? Hold on. Here we go. Let's go back to our environment. And let me quickly point out a persona. Look at the bottom. Here's a persona. I'm saying that student wealth is a persona. For this particular case life cycle, I can add a new persona. In this case, I have client support, compliance officer, financial advisor, portfolio manager, user, wealth clients. All of those are personas that we created. User management. Here we see personas, their channels, how many users. Now, notice the relationship. Notice the relationship. I can associate operators, users, with a persona. And that's exactly what this is used for. This is part of being able to identify groups of people who have common work activities so that I can create a access group for their security that will benefit what they need to do. So what do? We identify personas, and then we add users, which would be operators, the specific user to perform the work in your application. So we see that, and right now there's only me, but if I'm creating this for a bank, for wealth management, for Santander, or whatever bank that you may bank with, then you would see the list of all the names there. All right, so that's what we're talking about when we talk about a persona. Where did I go? I went to user, and I went to user management. Now, all of those users, all of those users are associated with some type of organization. And I'll show you when I get to the operator. When I get to the operator, you'll see that I'm associated with some company's hierarchy. If I'm a worker, then I must report to a manager. If I'm a manager, I will report to a senior manager. If I'm a senior manager, typically report to a director. If I'm a director, I typically report to a senior director. If I'm a senior director, I report to a VP. If I'm a VP, then I may report to someone on the board. That's a typical company hierarchy that's used all over the world. Names may differ a bit, but that's typically the way it works. So this type of hierarchy is then implemented in Pega, and we implement it over the situational layer cake. We remember that unit, division, org, situational layer cake, org at the top, division in the middle. Then we have a unit, but we typically call it the application layer or the framework layer, similar in nature. But you see the organization that is there. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about persona and about operator. So in order for me to really talk about the operator, and we're going to look at the access group, which is the privileges into the system, and the access role, which will then further give them exactly what they can and can't do, such as to view or to update or to delete for their particular job. So let's take a look at that. Now, in order for me to do that, I'll have to drop into Dev Studio. Can't really talk about the access group in App Studio because that is more of a technical rule that is usually not given access through the access group to view, update, or delete. So you don't see it. But in this case, since I am a developer in this system, I can go to my operator. Notice I'm not really associated with a persona. I don't have to be associated with a persona. Let me make sure that you're clear with that. It is not a requirement that every operator has to be associated with a persona, but it would be beneficial if you're building a system in that you would do that. It would be easy for you to look at some operator and say, oh, if that operator is associated with this persona, I know that they're using this access group. That's typically the relationship that persona, operator, and access group have. I try to identify personas so that I will know what level of security, what level of access they will need. And I can add those roles to make that happen. So I'll go to the operator. And you'll see in my operator, here's my profile, first name, last name, full name, position, title, phone, my email. All that information is there. If I go to my security, I could update my password. So here's my password. So I have to have a password for authentication to allow me into the system. Here is my operator ID. So I would have to enter in Darryl Dunnington, and it's not case sensitive. The operator name is not case sensitive, but the password is. So I would enter in Darryl space Dunnington. I would then go in and enter in my password, and it would allow me to get into my system. It would bring up a particular portal. Notice this. It's starting an activity. Part of that activity is to create my portal so that it is established, so it comes up and I can see it. The organization that I told you about, covered that yesterday, but just so you know that every operator has to be associated with some level of their organization and associated with a team. Everybody's on a team and they have someone that they report to. So here's a reporting structure. Who's your manager? Who's your senior manager? Who's your director? So you have that reporting structure that's actually there. So that we can do things like routing. You guys should be familiar with routing now. The work gets moved to someone else, to another operator that has certain privileges through their access group to now look at that portion of the case and carry out their tasks that they need to carry out. Well, it can only be routed if I understand their organizational structure. That operator is on a team, is within some hierarchy of that organization. All right, so this operator, you as an operator, if you look over, you have access groups. And remember, access groups by definition are the privileges into a system. So it is that rule that says that what hangs off of it are access roles. So what I like to say is the sum of the roles is the total privileges that an operator has in the system. The sum of the roles would be the total privileges that a given operator will have within the system. And typically, these roles you see as wealth, sysadmin 4, wealth, security administrator, wealth, Pega AI. I could add more roles. Hit my down arrow, see if there's any out of the box that I want to add. I may want to add that here's a financial clerk. So now the financial clerk, notice that I've given some additional roles: accounting clerk, work manager, and user 4. So now the sum of the roles, would determine the total level of privileges that one may have. Okay. But now notice, I would have to choose to have this access group. I would no longer have these rows. I would only have this row. Right? So this is me adding more access groups if I needed to do that. Well, but we're not going to do that. Okay. So the other day I didn't show you what a role looked like, but remember I said within that role, it's an object-oriented security system, and it gives you the ability to determine which objects that you get access to, that you can read, write, or we should say view, update, or delete. Now notice what this is saying, that I can read, write, delete certain instances. So what would be an instance? An instance would be a case type that I have executed, which means what? It creates an object. That's an instance. That's a case instance, or that's an object instance. So what can I do with that instance that's active? I can read it, write it, delete it. Can I read rules, write rules? Typically, if I'm a user, I can read the rules in essence because it's processing what I need it to do, but I typically won't be able to write it if I'm a user. If I'm a developer, I typically want to write the rules and have some level where I could view reading the rules. Typically, a developer will be able to delete rules, but a user will not be able to delete rules. I can execute a report, execute activities. I can even have more granular privileges that are set. So this is just an example of how I can specify exactly what a user or a operator can do based upon a given class. So you see, here is a list of all of the classes. So I can come in, and if I could find, let's see if I can find the wealth management class, the wealth, put in a W. That's the work class, text analytics, blah, 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 blah. Oh, I'm sorry, I said W, let's see, M. There it is. So here's like the wealth org for estate planning. And I may come, if I can select it, it will let me select it. Come on. Oh, I think I just lost my system. Give me a second for it to come back. So what I was trying to do is show you how I could look at a particular class, which is implemented, case, which is implemented as a class, and I can specify exactly what I could do on that particular object when it got instantiated, or that class when it got instantiated into an object or a case instance is another way that we take a look at it. Okay, so it takes us here. Let's see if we can, just so you can, so that you can get a feel as to what can be done. All right, let's see if it will let me select estate planning. I don't know if my system is moving so slow. I don't know if it's going to let me do that. Happens if I click outside. Well, if I selected a class, you could see I could select a class, and then I could go in and set what I actually want to do. Do I want to allow reading or writing of this, or deleting? Read a rule, delete a rule, write a rule, execute a report, execute an activity. Or if I want more granular privileges, then that's what I would do. This is definitely a feature of a system architect, not a business architect. But I just wanted to show you when we talk about how do we allow a operator to view something versus update versus delete. Well, here you see exactly how we would make that happen. And we'd have an administrator that would allow us to go through that process and set for that access group all of the privileges that are needed based upon the access role. So hopefully that gives you a great perspective. That's more information that you need to, more information than you need to know for the test, but it prepares you for SAE, and it gives you a thorough understanding of the relationship between a persona, right, that group of users, and that operator, a specific user that performs tasks, and the access group, which is the grouping of the privileges through the access role. All right, so that takes us back to there. All right, so I think we did a good job in answering that question, but let's go through your study guide, and it would tell you that all you have to do is go to your App Studio, go to user management. I showed you that. You saw the personas you could create, and you could add additional personas if you like. And when or why do we do that? What's our use case? Because we want to be able to group people into common activities so that when they work on a particular portion of a case, like a manager who may be needed to review, approve, delete, many other things within the loan department, then we can set the appropriate security. All right, so let's take a look at our next question. Question number 2. Remember, there's only 2 questions for security, for the security section. So you should make 100. You should make 100. You should not miss any of this on the certification. Authorization, authentication. 2 concepts you need to learn. They are very easy to understand and to know. Number 1, authentication. It deals with who can access an application. It's the first line of defense for Pega. In securing an application, it's going to require a operator name. Typically, email addresses are used, a unique password that will make up what we call the operator ID. Right? The operator ID is composed of password, email, and many other items. Remember when I showed you this, all of this is part of the operator ID, right? There are 4 tabs of information that truly make up the operator ID. But when it comes to authentication, that's really only focusing on username or what's your operator ID to get into the system and what is your password. That's all authentication is. Who can access the application? Who has the right to access the application? And then the other component is authorization, right? Authorization. Authorization says what? Who can access the application and defines the access that users have to a specific feature, like an object, a widget, a portal in Pega. Those are all examples. There's many, many more. But we set authorization by using a access group, which has within it roles which will identify certain classes and what capabilities you have on those classes to read, write, delete, for reports to execute or run activities. And we have 3 common ways to do that. We have 3 common ways to do that. What I just showed you was RBAC. That's the most common one, role-based access control. It's going to organize users into their roles, and then it's going to assign the privileges or the permissions that are appropriate. So it's role-based. We're looking at it from a viewpoint of, if you have this role, you'll have this security or this access group. If you have another role, you'll have this access group or security. But there are other ways that you can define security and authorization. I could use ABAC, attribute-based access control. Attribute-based access control. Now, the example that I use there is typically if I'm working in a government agency and it's based upon, let's say I'm a CIA agent. So I do spying. I'm a CIA agent. So what type of activities would I be responsible for? Well, based upon what my activities are, that's what access that they give me to the system. Do I get access to information that is security or secure based for the government? Probably, yeah, because of the type of work that I do, I have that attribute and I can definitely do that. So it specifies where users can access an object by comparing certain characteristics of that object to attributes. And then the third one is client-based access control. So now that's a different implementation. We'll talk in depth about that when we get into SAE. But in essence, we want to look at, for a client, what objects or what activities are they doing? View, update information. It tends to dwell more in personal information, PII, if you guys are familiar with that. So PII, you have to make sure that your data is, that your personal information is secure. So that's what the client-based access control is. All right. So here we look at how would we get into the system to look at some of this. You get into user management from the App Studio to users, and you saw that now I have all these personas, but now the personas, if I go to a different tab, I go to the people. So we saw that. And I can look at all of the people. I can invite people to my application. And while I'm inviting them, I can assign them or associate them with a persona. And that's typically the work of an LSA, even though you have the app, you have access to look at this in the App Studio, but typically an administrator, an LSA, they perform that level of activity. All right, so now that covers everything we needed to cover for security. Let's take a look at the next three topics that we have, and they will cover insight. So let me go back to here. And we just covered these two. Describe the relationship between personas, operators, and access groups, and articulate the difference between authorization and authentication. Now let's take a look at these last three. Describe the benefits of using insights, create visualizations, and use column filters and sorting. So they'll ask you a question, what can I do with an insight? Well, I can filter and sort. That's what I can do. On what? Off of the columns. So hopefully everyone is already familiar, if they've used a spreadsheet, how to use the filter feature, the sorting feature, right? That's what you should really think about when you look at insights. Things that you do in a spreadsheet on columns, you can filter off of those columns, you can do sorting, and it gives you a really good understanding of the principles that apply here for these insights. But now, what are insights? They are rules. Pega use these rules to transform data queries. If you guys remember, are familiar with SQL, the SQL language that you write against database tables, like with a where clause, where something is equal, select this information from a table where it's equal to a value. So we take those data queries and we transform those into tables, data tables that are easily utilized or can be read, or into visualizations, into a pie chart, different types of charts that you can see. And you have the ability to share with your team. Users can share, right? So you have these team insights that will allow you to retrieve the data and do presentation of that data in an interactive chart. That's what an insight. That's the benefit. That's the benefit. The benefit of an insight is the ability to retrieve data, transform data queries into tables or visualizations so that you can present that data as a list or a interactive chart. That is the sole purpose. And how do we get there? We go to explore data and look at that landing page for a list of all the previously created insights. So those are some out of the box insights that are already there for you. So let's go back to Dev Studio. Now notice that insights are not on Dev Studio. They are only found on App Studio. So let's go back to App Studio. And over to the left, we have to click on Explore Data. So this is the Explore that I go to, Explore Data. And what do you find? You'll find a list of insights that are already created. And you can create your own insight. Right. So these are existing insights. You know what? Let me collapse this just to show you that there's so much out there that's already built. So before you go trying to build something yourself, maybe you want to go and see what's already out there. Look at this, estate planning, financial goals. Let's see. I don't think we've done much on estate planning. Let's see if there's any. There's some information out there. Oh, I did enter some values. So in all my examples and my demos that I was doing, the system captures that in the Pega tables for the work dash data for the work case types. So that case data gets stored. We'll talk about the blob, where it gets stored in this blob, binary large object. And then I can go and retrieve that information at any time with these insights, because these insights are based upon data queries. So it queries the database for that information and it then presents it. And so now I have access to it. And you see, I entered in all of this different information that was there. And I can come over. Remember some of the options that I have. I can refresh. I can save as. So if I want to save it as a different name, give it to my team. Now I have the capabilities to do that. I can actually schedule it to run. I have that functionality. I want this to run every Thursday at 7:30. I can schedule this to run and I can indicate who it can be sent to. Now, that's the actions, but let's look at the edit. I come to the edit, right? And that's where I have all of my functionality, right? I can easily create both a table or chart-based insights. So here you see this is default to a table, or I can make it a chart. Now, once I select that I want to make it a chart, now I can specify the type of chart. If it's a simple chart, it's a pie chart. These are some of the options, a column, a bar chart, go back to a summary table. Those are just out of the box features, right? Those are out of the box features that I can do. I can come here, I can add filters. Filters are, I can limit its information. I can say where it's equal to a certain thing. So maybe I only want to select people's birthday that's within a certain year. That's what my filter would do. My filter says I want to constrain my information. It gives me the capabilities to do that, right? Let's see, what else can I do? I can sort. So it gives me the capability to sort. Maybe I want to sort by one of the columns of data that's actually out there. It gives me that capability. I can add calculations, right? I can actually add calculations. I can choose different objects to work on instead of just this object. I can add more fields. So if I look, if I'm saying this is not enough fields, I need to add more fields to my application or to my insight, I then can do that. So you see, it just gives you all of these features. It gives you all the functionality. Here's data, here's charts, and then I can go to a chart and I can set all of these parameters. If it's series, the grid, the legend, reference, all right, axis, tooltips, conditional formatting. It'll even print you some sample data. If you're wanting sample data, it'll show you over here. This is what you can expect to see. Okay, so all of these features are there. I can save the insight and share it with my team, and it gives me all the capabilities that I need here in this particular insight. Okay, so you see the name of the insights, a description, who they're visible to. Some are only for the administrators. Some I've made visible to the public. And who is the owner or who is the operator. All right, so here you see that as an image where we've gone to explore data, showed you the similar output that I showed to you. And then in the right corner, you see some of the other features and functionality that you have, the available fields, the sample data that's there. So when do I use this? What is my use case? When I want to look at data associated with a case or cases, and I want to have a visual representation of that I can easily provide to my team or to myself or to others, maybe in marketing, that might need that information. All right, so let's go to the next question. Now, explain how to create visualizations of tables and charts. Very simple. I just showed that to you, to where you can go to the insight, and in that insight, you saw that I have a data table, or I can do a table and chart. So those are very simple. Again, these questions you should pass with flying colors. You should get every last one of those. You get table-based charts, table-based insights, chart-based insights, simple value charts. Those are some of the things that they may ask you about, but these are very simple concepts. Just want to make sure that you are clear with, when they ask you questions, that you know an insight, you should immediately say, I'm going to the explore data, and that's where I can create or use existing insights that will quickly show me the data as a table or as a chart. All right, and then the final question, of course, is And we did this, describe how to use columns, filters, and sorting. So I showed you those options there. Column is considered any field that you want to show. Filter allows you to restrain or restrict the display of information based upon specific criteria. And then sorting says, how do I want to arrange it? I sort ascending or descending. And I go up to my app studio in the right corner, or down at the bottom, you'll see that I have all these filters and I have the sorting that I can do. All right. So that is it. That covers everything that I wanted to share with you today. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you for your time and attention. And I look forward to seeing you on Monday morning at 10 a.m. Thank you and have a good evening. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Anyone have any questions or comments? You guys good? All right. Thank you very much. I am signing off. Stop the recording.